So Robert, how have you been?
All is well. Beautiful fall day up here in Alaska. We're getting ready for winter, packing up all the wood and the whole 9 yards. You know how it goes.
Well, I'm starting to see some photos come out of Alaska, the training runs showing the fall colors. And we're still about a month away from fall colors here in northern Maine.
You know, it happens so quick here. All the leaves are already falling off. And what's unusual here, unlike a lot of places, we only have yellows and greens. You guys have all the beautiful colors up that way.
We do enjoy the reds. I do enjoy seeing those reds burst forth when the time is right. For those who are joining into our conversation that don't know who Robert Forto is, you obviously have not been around the mushing scene, because Robert Forto is really a force. He's an entrepreneur and a musher. Robert Forto is the owner of Mushing Magazine, the Mushing Podcast. And if you're not subscribed to the Mushing Podcast, you absolutely have to subscribe to it. It is where I'll hit on mushing here every once in a while, but then I'll go and talk to a sword fighter or go talk to someone who's doing some history or whatever. The Mushing Podcast is dedicated specifically to mushing. You get the inside scoop on the Iditarod. They do a really great Iditarod insider kind of program during the race where they give you updates all the time. So Robert's on top of all of that. He just acquired Mushing Magazine. And Robert, I've got to tell you that Mushing Magazine was one of my first introductions to dog sledding. When I got out of the Marine Corps and had an old timer telling me when I was moving to Maine, if you're gonna go to Maine, you've got to find a way to enjoy the outdoors, and the snow or the long winters are going to drive you crazy. And I love dogs. I'd never met a musher. I'd never seen a dog sled team. I got the twins that write for your magazine. What are their names?
Mickey and Julie Collins.
Yes, I got their book, and this is a long time ago, man. I got their book, and I got the Speed Musher manual, and I got Mushing Magazine. I got a subscription to Mushing Magazine, and man, I could not wait for that magazine to arrive. And now you are at the helm of that ship. So why don't we just start there? Let's talk about the acquisition of Mushing Magazine and what you guys got going on, what you're excited about, and why you decided to take it on.
Well, first off, Jonathan, thank you very much for having me on your show. I know we've talked about this for a couple of months, and congrats on jumping into the podcast game. It's definitely a tough hoe to haul sometimes. So I appreciate you jumping on board with that and rocking and rolling. So let's talk a little bit about Mushing Magazine. As you mentioned, we've been in the podcasting space for a long time. 2009 was our first episode. It was a dog training podcast. We have never missed a week. That's something we hold our hat on pretty good. That's a long time to be sitting here in front of the mic every week. But around the same time, we were dabbling in doing some mushing coverage. And I flew up to Alaska in 2010 to handle for my buddy Hugh Neff at the Iditarod. And I also went to a leadership conference with a friend of mine named Chris Fuller, who wrote a book called Iditarod Leadership. And he said, you ought to bring your podcast up here with you when you are here for the Iditarod start. So we did that and started dabbling a little bit with our Iditarod coverage then. I guess this was February of 2010. And we started doing that every year. And that went on for many years, 13, 14 years or so now. And we had always been followers of Mushing Magazine. As you mentioned, we had followed it for many years from afar. That was one of the first introductions I had to mushing as well. And sometime last year, and there's an interesting story we can get into in a second, but the previous owners, Nils and Diana, live up in Nome, and they called me up and said, hey, are you interested in taking this over? And of course I said yes, and it took a few months to work everything out. And before you know it, in December of last year, we kicked it off with some fanfare, I guess you would say. And we have two issues. I keep wanting to say episodes because of the podcast. Two issues in our arsenal right now, and we're working on the third.
Well, I have to say that I know that unlike me, you're very tech savvy. And while I'm on that note, I want to say thank you for the encouragement over the last couple of years. I kept telling you, man, I want to do a podcast. I want to do a podcast. And for me, it's more of whatever I'm interested in, whatever I'm excited about. If I find someone interesting, I just want to have a conversation with them and share it with the world. And oftentimes that goes into mushing, but not all the time. But you gave me a lot of advice on getting ramped up here. I'm really grateful for that. But as it pertains to Mushing Magazine, I know you are a very tech savvy dude, and I am not a very tech savvy dude. And I was watching with bated breath, wondering where it was, like whether you were going to go completely digital with it, or whether you were going to stay with the print. And I got to tell you, man, like it still is like it's still a big deal to me. I've got my magazine my magazine rack next to the toilet, and,
Okay,
and
yeah.
it's like habit, man. I sit down and I grab Mushing Magazine, and look over some. I love the dogs, the kennel section that focuses on kennels and certain dogs in the kennels, and I they're great things that newbies like I was 25 years ago, just getting into mushing, or even people that are really experienced and have been around it for a while, can glean from it. Like I've noticed over the last few years that the size of the dogs in the Iditarod are starting to go up again. Whereas, they got smaller, smaller, smaller. Now we're starting to see, a 60, 65 pound dogs more often, more frequently, that kind of thing. And so those kind of things always really interest me. Um, Tell us about your decision, that decision process, because I knew you were on the fence about whether you're just going to go digital, whether you're going to keep the print, and tell me what it was that finalized that decision for you.
Well, first off, there's a lot of things down the pipe that we're changing up to make it a much more inclusive, in many ways, publication and media offering. But we asked right away, what do you guys want? We were very transparent on our Facebook page, asking where people were and what they're liking to see, and most of them said exactly what you said. They love to have that paper magazine, and I tend to agree with them. And we are going to continue that for the near future. Just this last month, I flew down to our printers in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, and saw the entire print process from the time they get the file to literally it's all printed there on this huge press. And I was so impressed by that. And I remember telling the lady there at the print shop or print whatever. I said, "Hey, print is definitely not dead, is it?" And she said, "Oh, by no means. We would be out of a job if we were." So we're going to keep it up as long as we possibly can. One of the big struggles with print, and this is in any publication, whether it be newspapers, magazines, trade journals, or whatever, it's just so expensive to print a magazine. It's about, just for our size publication, it's a couple of $1,000s per issue just to print. And of course, if that's not offset by advertising or anything like that, that obviously comes out of our pocket. And right now, we're funding that solely on the heels of our podcast. But our goal, Jonathan, is to keep up with the print. We did have to change it up a little bit. It was a bi-monthly magazine, and we had to go to quarterly every 3 months, mainly for
I
that
think that was
financial deal. We just had to
Yeah, I
do
think
that
that was
because
a
it was so
wise move.
expensive. Yeah,
It was a wise move and a palatable one. And I'm going to challenge our listeners right now. If you like print magazine, put your money where your mouth is,
right.
and subscribe to this magazine. My wife was getting me Mushing Magazine, and then for Christmas presents, and then my subscription ran out, and it had been a while, and then you guys bought it, and I was waiting to see if you guys were going to carry on with the print. And the moment I saw Michelle, I'm sorry about that. The moment I saw Michelle Forto make the video that she did about your trip to the printer, and how she said, that print will be going forward here. The moment I saw that video, I started pulling up your website to subscribe, because a lot of people have their armchair opinions about what they want to see you do, but you guys have made the tough call to keep the print going. And I think everybody should be supporting that. If you want to see, if you want a magazine that you can hold in your hand and keep that tradition going, I want to encourage everyone to get on over to Mushing Magazine and sign up.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and I do think a quarterly. I mean, monthly obviously is great, but I think quarterly is a good pattern, because you're not scrambling to try to find content. You always have more content than you have room for when you're going quarterly. So I think that's great. But let's shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about your podcast too. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about just how you got into mushing. We'll start there, and then I want to talk a little bit about you as an entrepreneur. But take us back. Tell us how long ago and where you were and what got you into dog sledding.
It was 1994. I was attending college in Portland, Oregon, thought I was going to be a veterinarian. And that quickly changed when I realized I did not want to spend the rest of my life in a white coat and in a vet office. So I started doing some dog training in the park of the suburbs of Portland, mainly training up those moms or housewife dogs, if you will. And shortly thereafter, I was pretty involved with the competition obedience scene. I had a Siberian, his name was Axel, after the Guns N' Roses fame back in the early days of that. And I
And
had
on the theme with you that maybe you like big hair bands. I mean,
a little bit, a little bit. Yeah. So I had this dog Axel, and we were competing in competition obedience, which in and of itself, having a Siberian in an obedience ring is something to be desired. But anyway, I had a mutual friend. Her name was Linda. We were at a show somewhere in Oregon, outside of Portland there, and she said, "I am a breeder of Siberians, and I would love for you to come down and see what we had." And she lived in Georgia. So being a young, early 20s guy, I jumped in my Datsun 280Z and pretty much drove nonstop from Portland to the mountains of Georgia. And like a lot of us, once we were introduced to mushing, there was no turning back. She hooked us up to an old Seiko cart. That's one of those carts you sit down in and you hook up a team. And boy, we took off through the mountains, and I was hooked. I came back with two puppies, Rutger and Reich, and that was the start of my mushing career, if you will. And about the same time, my grandfather passed away. And unbeknownst to the family, he had I like to call it a cabin, but it was more like a house up in northern Minnesota. And of course, I jumped on that. I moved to Minnesota. Two dogs became four, became six, became eight, all of that. You know how it goes. And again, right around the same time was when the Disney movie Iron Will came out. And I think a lot of mushers, especially as older school guys, really got our start when that movie came out. And I thought I was going to be the next Iron Will, like a lot of us were. And yeah, we just started there, and story
I have
progressed.
no idea. I have no idea what you're talking about, but I can quote every line of that movie.
For sure, for sure. So fast forward about 15 years or so, and here we are in Alaska at a beautiful spot here in arguably the mushing capital of the world, Willow, Alaska, and we've been doing it ever since.
Yeah. So tell me about what's in your yard now, and where they're from, and what you've got that's making up your team now. Because I'm
Well,
assuming they're not all fluffy show Siberians anymore.
no, they are not. We have 30-ish dogs in the kennel. We have one Siberian Husky. He's 14. His name is Bodhi. We have one Seppala Siberian from this man right here. I flew up to Maine and picked her up. What an experience that was. But we have that little girl, Isolt, and then we have the rest of them are Alaskan Huskies. a majority of our lines is from my friend Brenda Mackey. I would say well more than half are from Brenda and her line. So we got some really exceptional dogs here. Man, I just love it. I thought I was going to be a Siberian guy for my entire life, but I was quickly introduced to the Alaskans when I moved to Alaska. And they're not the pretty sled dogs as a lot of people say, and I know that you could argue that as well. But man, when you get behind a team of Alaskans, it is something to be desired, and that's what we have right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a different animal. I tell, and as you know, I had the privilege of working with Mitch Seavey a couple seasons back, and that's um, also cream of the crop Alaskans for Alaska. I don't know Brenda Mackey very well, but I follow her on social media, and it looks like she's doing great things. But yeah, it's a completely different animal, and I tell people it's like, do you want to drive a Formula One race car, or do you want to drive a '67 Camaro? And for me, it's the '67 Camaro.
Hey, I can't
Um,
argue with that for sure. I cannot argue.
yeah. So that's cool. But shifting into your entrepreneurship, I was thinking about this on my way home from work. The way to become a millionaire through mushing is to start out as a billionaire, and but you have, and I'm hoping that next year I'll be able to transition. We're looking to do dog sled expeditions here in Maine, tourism, overnight tourist expeditions, and canoe trips during the summer. So I'm looking to transition, this 25 years of work that I've done into something next year. But you've been able to take this passion of yours, mushing and sled dogs and training dogs. I know you have a training business as well. And there, you're just wired like you're an entrepreneur, like a true entrepreneur. And so, how did you get these two things to gel, and how's it working out for you?
Well, as I said, I started dog training in my early college years, and within just probably a few months from that is when the mushing started. So they have been married together literally for 30 years. And everything that we do is focused on uh, being a part of that lifestyle. And that lifestyle doesn't necessarily have to involve racing and carrying on. Racing is only a small portion of dog mushing, but that it like you said, it's truly our passion. And thankfully all of our businesses have been able to fund one another. And I think that's very important, especially in this line of work. I see so many people get in so far over their head in the mushing world because they don't have the ability to fund one or the other. Either their work life
Mhm.
suffers or their kennel expenses suffer in one way or the other. And
Right.
I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. But that's just sort of how it is. So we set up our processes to work so that one could fund the other at all times. And I think that's very important to be able to do that. And we're always innovating. When we took over Mushing Magazine, we knew right from the start we're going to do things different, and we do that in the dog training world as well. With our podcast, that was our way to reach audiences outside of Alaska. Alaska is a relatively small market for dog training, so we had to figure out a way to do that. And through all of my years of being self-employed, I've never had a real job. So, it's just been one major push after another to make sure that we can keep these passions alive, and been doing it for a long time and hope to do it at least until I'm ready to retire.
That's an interesting thought, and I haven't really thought of it that way before. But having multiple businesses, while it might seem to an outsider like me to be a lot to juggle, and I'm sure it is a lot to juggle, but they also can be like strands of a web that kind of help to support one another and hold each other up. So that does make a lot of sense. That's interesting. Has it taken any of the joy of mushing out of mushing, having it be a business? I do know a couple people who say that when they converted their passion for mushing into, say, a dog sled tour business, that it kind of sucked all of the joy out of mushing out for them. Has any of that been the case with you, or have you been able to find that balance?
Well, it's definitely a 16-hour a day plus job for sure. So it's something that we think about literally 24 hours a day. You know how it is with a dog kennel. If they're barking at 3 o'clock in the morning, you got to go up and take care of it. So it's definitely something that's always on our mind. And you asked about did it ever suck any passion out? I guess it was right around COVID. We got an opportunity to teach dog mushing at the two local universities, at University of Alaska Anchorage and Alaska Pacific University. And that truly brought the passion back, because every year we're able to introduce groups of students that have never been involved with mushing before and teach them the ins and outs of it. And it's not like a tour where you come and you run around the track for an hour or two and you say, yep, I did that. That's awesome. But with ours, especially at our class at APU, it's a 2 credit class and well over a month in length. So we literally mold and form these young people into be very competent dog drivers. And it is so cool, Jonathan, when a couple years later down the way, they'll say on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, hey, that's Marley, or hey, that's Ziggy, or that's Isolt. And, they know the dog still, and they know the stories, and they talk about it with their friends. And a very cool story, our first year at APU, we had a guy named Ian out, and I don't remember where he came from, somewhere in the lower 48. And he came up specifically to take our dog mushing course at the college. So, he enrolled, but that was one of his focuses. And we saw him, I guess it was last year or so. He's still at the school, and he came into the most recent class, and he had an entire forearm tattoo of a dog team. And I thought, oh my
He's
goodness,
sold.
he was sold. And yeah, very similar, but yeah, right there. And you have them when they ink up their arm. And he asked my daughter Nicole, who helps me out with that class. He asked her just a couple of weeks ago if he can be the TA, the teaching assistant this year for our course. And that's where the passion lies, is introducing the new people. And if we can keep this sport alive that way, I think we got something good going.
Yeah, I think, and you mentioned Nicole, and I know that she early on in life embraced the passion of dog sledding, and she trains with you guys. As you know, my kids, I've worked really hard to get them engaged in dog sledding. I'm at this lull right now where my kids are upper teens, early 20s, kind of like your daughter did, out spreading their wings, doing their thing. So I've gone from training one large dog sled team with two of my kids and a local guy that just wanted to learn how to mush, to this year I'm training two teams by myself without any help. So uh, when did you see, like, Nicole start to come back to this passion for dogs and mushing, and that those seeds that you had planted?
Well, she had been around dog mushing since she was literally a toddler. She used to be out in the kennel with us at 3 years old. And when we moved to Alaska in 2010, she was the one that chose our house. We were sitting right here behind me, and she texted her mom, and mom was in Colorado working, and we were here together, Nicole and I. And she texted mom and said, "Mom, we're moving to Alaska." And that's sort of the story and how it goes. She was 12 at the time, and she came up. She ran junior Iditarod twice in consecutive years. Did a bunch of the Willow Junior and other races around here. And then, like most kids, and pretty close to where your kids are or were, right around the time they graduate high school, they're ready to, I'm done. I've done this for too long. I've got to go figure out what else is in life, and she was gone for a few years, and she came back several years ago. And as a matter of fact, she's sitting in the room right to my left here, and she is a business partner with us, and takes care of the dogs and does the whole 9 yards. And so it took a little while, but she is back, and like I said, she is so passionate about it with our students every year. And we're training for expeditions and smaller races and dry land and all of that, and she's about it. She's with it. So they'll come back around at one point or another, Jonathan. Just give it a little bit of time.
Yeah, I was on the phone with the acclaimed polar explorer Eric Larson. I was on the phone with him this morning, and we were talking with him, and it's public knowledge, so I'm not sharing anything here that's private. He had a bout with terminal cancer that he was only given, I think it was 6 months to live, and he overcame that, and he's running expeditions again. And we talked about dads and drive and desire to to do great things. And you know really what it all boils down to is our kids, and having that relationship with them and that legacy and that connection with them, because uh you know we can do amazing things, right? But if at the end of our life, if we don't have that connection with our kids, they're the ones that are going to tell our story when we're gone. So I think that's awesome that she's working with you guys and interwoven so much a part of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. She's in her mid 20s right now, and I'm sure she could probably be doing a bunch of different things, but she has chosen that path, and she is truly in line for succession at some point down the line when we're ready to hang up the harnesses, if you will. She will be the one taking it over, and I think that's most important with Mushing Magazine and how we can prolong that into the future. I think that's a very key component to us. It literally was going to die less than a year ago, and if we could figure out a way to keep that going, and if we can include the next generations, whether it's my daughter or the people up and coming or whatever, I think that's an important part of this legacy.
Yeah. And your podcast, I mean, which came first? I'm guessing it was the dog training podcast came first, and then you grew into mushing. Of course, I know you from the mushing podcast, but you've gone from being a podcaster of a single podcast to you're actually overseeing a network of podcasts at this point, right?
Right. I think
So tell me.
Yeah, I think we have 5 or 6 shows, 3 shows right now that are hosted by other people. We just brought on the Musher's Checkpoint podcast, which is hosted by Iditarod veteran Aaron Peck and Canadian Challenge race director, I believe, president, whichever he is, Dan Kirkup. They host a podcast together,
I
which
like it. I think Dan is doing a great job. I really enjoy his. He's got a super chill, laid back style.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
nice to listen to.
Yeah, so we have those guys on board and a couple of others. We have a dryland podcast from a couple in Wisconsin and so on and so forth. But yeah, the dog training podcast started off. We started that when we had our dog training business in Denver. It literally started on a Saturday morning. We set up a couple of mics in our lobby, and folks from group class would come in and ask questions. Why does my dog jump on me, or why is it peeing in the house or whatever. So we would answer those questions and we would record them. And of course, that became a podcast. And as I mentioned, the show used to be called Mush You Huskies back in the day. That was around 2010-ish or so. And then once we moved to Alaska, we really kicked off the mushing. It was called Mushing Radio at the time. And we were hosting it at a local radio station here. And that's still going on to best of my knowledge, the only mushing podcast anywhere in the country that is weekly on the radio. And we've been doing that ever since. And shortly thereafter, we started doing our Iditarod coverage, which is a nightly show. That's where most of our traffic in the year comes from. It's like the Olympics. Everybody is a gymnastics or an ice skating fan during the Olympics. And it's the same with Iditarod. You'll see thousands and thousands of people flocking to your podcast, and literally the day it's over, it's dang near crickets. So Yeah, it's an interesting genie in the bottle for our Iditarod coverage, but hey, it gets us through the year, and I think that's what's important. And yeah, we keep rolling with it.
Yeah, I told you, I think in Messenger, that in hindsight, which is always 2020, I probably should have waited until after my expedition to launch my podcasts. But I'm doing one podcast for our church, and I'm doing this podcast, and as you know, they kind of take on a life of their own, and if you miss a week, people start asking why, and so. What advice would you give for somebody like me who's just getting my feet wet in podcasting?
I tell people all the time, it is literally a 3-to-1 work ratio. So every hour you record, you should be doing about 3 hours of promotion or talking about it or editing or something other than sitting behind the mic. I think that's very important. Spread your podcast to as many places as absolutely possible. So if you're on YouTube, go to YouTube. If you're on all the apps, do put on all the apps and get on other people's podcasts. That's how I really have grown our reach, if you will. Is I'm on a lot of podcasts just like this one to be able to talk about ours and share the wealth, if you will, and start an email list, start a newsletter. I think that's probably our best advice. We send out a weekly newsletter to several thousand people every week, and by far that's where most people listen is through that newsletter. And I think that's very important because that is your audience. That's who is most engaged, are the people that have said, yes, we want your content, yes, we want to listen, and yes, we will hit play. Whereas on Facebook or Twitter or X or whatever, Instagram, it's in passing. People might listen for a minute or two and then just sort of move on.
Yeah. Well, and your daughter can feel free to join in on this test. I'm gonna test your dog training skills here. I have a problem.
Okay.
Maybe you can help me.
Okay.
so, so I have I have a very strong opinion on this. That intelligent dogs and trainable dogs are not always necessarily the same thing. Before I got into sled dogs, I had and bred Rottweilers, and very programmable, very easy to train, nowhere near as smart as the Seppala Siberians that I work with now. Um, we have a house pet. We have a German Shepherd who is very loving, very affectionate. He's very obedient. He's very connected to us. Just all around good dog. Except there's always the except. If and he never does it during the daytime, and he never does it when we're out with him. But if in the middle of the night, if the guy has to take a dump, or if he needs to relieve himself, he will go. We mostly have hardwood floors in our house, but he will go to the only carpet in our house and unload. And waking up once or twice a week to those gifts are not ideal. And again, as low key and as responsive as he is to us, and as intimately tied as he is to us, the only time he will growl at us is when we say, what did you do? What is this? That kind of thing. And he'll lower his head and he'll growl and he'll kind of go off into the corner. And so I'm trying to figure out how to deal with this in a way that's going to be positive for him, but stop the process, stop this cycle. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, of course, there's a lot to unpack there, Jonathan. I have met this dog twice. I guess I've been to your place twice now. I've met him a couple of different times. Once when we were picking up the pup, and then I guess it was last year when we were out and we were at your place. So definitely have met this dog on a couple of occasions. First off, it would probably come down to routine, and as you mentioned, it's probably in the middle of the night, so something is knocking off the routine. I would bet, whether it's open feeding or feeding too late or too many treats or whatever. Without knowing exactly. Typically, that happens if there's a difference in routine. Second, typically it is a dominance or hierarchy issue. So if there are new dogs in the house or a change in the household structure from one way or the other, whether it's people coming and going or different routines for the people. So if your wife got up to go to the restroom at 3 o'clock, it wakes the dog up and he feels he has to go, and so on and so forth are a couple of things. In terms of the growling, that's almost always a fear or instinctual response back and forth. Like, here I am doing my thing, and here you come and you want to scold me. It's very similar to how it is with the kids, and their way of dealing with that is either fight or flight. And I think you're getting a little bit of both of those, whether it be hackles up or ears down or whatever. If it's in the middle of the night and here comes this guy, it could be dark, and so on and so forth. I would say that those are your big issues, but I would bet it's probably a routine issue more than anything.
That's great advice. Thank you. And I think that probably is our routine and our schedule between me training dogs and my wife just took on coaching middle school soccer after her day job. And so we're in and out, in and out. Literally, when I came in to do this podcast with you, came in from work, she was going out. So we
Wow.
like literally said, so yeah, there's definitely a lack of routine issue there that probably could be addressed. So thank you for that.
Right.
Um, so so where to next? What is Robert Forto excited about? What is what in your business and mushing, like what's next? What's your next big thing that you're working on, and how can we follow you as you do it?
Well, as I mentioned, a bunch of stuff is developing at the mushing media side of things that are going to be released very soon. We're going to start sponsoring some events. We're doing something very cool with that. We just announced today that we're working with a couple of races where we're giving everybody that enters the race a subscription to the magazine, and we're giving a portion of every entry to a local nonprofit. I think that's going to be a cool thing that we're doing. On a personal side, I'm finishing up finally my doctorate degree. I just finished up data collection last week, doing data analysis this week. Yeah, so finishing that up, that should be done in December. Thank you. And just keep on going. We're planning on an expedition very similar to yours. We're working with a student with Alaska Pacific doing that. It's more outdoor leadership based, meaning she's doing it as her projects. We're talking about logistics and planning and all of that. And I'm just going along for the first time in a long time. I'm going along just as a participant, where I'm hooking up a dog team and I'm going to try to get from point A to point B. And it's
Yeah.
good when you don't have to plan everything. And I think that's important.
Oh,
Yeah.
listen, man, I
Yeah.
I tell you right now, I told you I was on the phone with Eric Larson this morning, and he does several expeditions a year, and every time I'm like, man, I need you to do this. And he's like, no, no, no. He's always very encouraging. You're doing a great job. You're doing awesome. I'm really impressed with the progress you're making, but man, oh man, the only way you can really describe it to somebody, and I know you've done this before, the only way I can describe it to someone is I'm like, okay, imagine that you are going to put on a long distance race, dog sled race. You're putting it on, and you're responsible for all the logistics of that dog sled race. And you got that in your mind? Okay. Now add to that you're training a team and you're running the race that you were putting on, and it's a distance race. Then you're just starting to get an idea of just how crazy this can be. It is an insane insane amount of work for sure. But so you've got that going on. You're growing the Mushing magazine. I'm really excited about that. You were talking about some nonprofit things that you've got going on that you're excited about.
Yes, with two races right now, the Chugiak Dog Mushers Dryland Derby, which is coming up in October, and a race in I guess it would be Central Washington. I'm trying to figure out where it is on the map. That's our first two events that we're sponsoring, and we have agreed to every person that enters, we're going to give $5 to a local nonprofit, and that nonprofit is doing something good in the community, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be just mushing, and our goal is to use that model and spread it out to things like Junior Iditarod and potentially the Iditarod and things like that as we go, because we realize that the only way to truly have a grassroots movement, Jonathan, is truly to be grassroots. And I think that is a key
Mhm.
way of doing that, is giving back. And it's not just giving back to the mushing community, because when we come into those communities, whether we're doing expeditions or races or events or whatever, we have to have the respect and the blessing, if you will, of the local community. And if we're able to come in and give back in one way or the other, that's how we grow the sport, and that's how we grow the lifestyle. Because it's always me when we're racing. You know, we come in, we race, we may spend a night in a hotel or whatever, and then we pack up and we go. But if there's a little bit of an impact that we can give that can help somebody in the community, I think that that is key.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's true in any endeavor, whether, uh, whether you're trying to build a business, a corporation, or, even, the local church that I'm working with, if I, I I've heard it said before, folks don't know, folks don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
And when you show that you care, and that that you're not in it for yourself, and that you want the community to be enriched, and not just yourself, then people can actually start to believe in you and what you're doing. And so I think that's awesome. And that's really, as we jetted up to Nome to spend a week up there working. And
Yep.
really the only reason we did that was, I mean, obviously I think it's a good cause, and I think it was great, to preserve that part of mushing history and Nome history. But the other thing too is I didn't just want to be someone who's taking. I wanted to, we're planning to mush to Nome in February. So like I don't want to just come in and do my thing and leave. Like I want to do something, contribute a little bit of something to the community up there. So I think that's awesome. So what can people do to follow you? Where would you like for people to start their journey with you and what you guys are doing? Um, and of course I'll put everything that you share in the show notes. But if people want to get involved with what you've got going on, where would you want to direct them?
Well, if this is a mushing podcast, definitely go to mushing.com. That is the easiest place to get us. There are links all over the place that lead back to that. If you'd like to follow me on any socials, right under my name, I'm just about everywhere. I try to answer every comment or DM or whatever, good, bad, or indifferent.
if
I
he's
will
not
answer.
if he's not at a rock concert.
If I'm not at a rock concert, but I'll be surprised if I'm not answering in the intermission. But yeah, I will definitely answer any questions or comments for sure. And if I can, Jonathan, just to promote you in any way and share this show with our audience, I think that's what's key.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to getting my new Mushing magazine in the mail. I'm looking forward to looking over it and being excited about what you guys are doing. And I can't tell you how many times you've been along on the ride when I'm training my sled dogs, or just doing kennel chores, or out on the trail training. Mushing podcast is always in my ear almost all the time. So thank you for your work, and I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, because there are a lot of us out here who are really grateful for your work.
Hey, I appreciate that. That's awesome. A lot of people have said that same thing, so that's always good news to hear for sure. So yeah, I look forward to keeping it up. And yeah, that next issue will be out in October. There's still time to subscribe for that. I know that you're a recent subscriber, and this issue coming out is all about the 100th anniversary of the Serum Run. We're going to have a bunch of cool stories. We're going to try to do stuff. I know you and I talked about this off air. We're going to try to do stuff that is not just what you can find on the internet. We're having some folks write for us that have firsthand knowledge about it, and may have been a part of that history in one way or the other. And I know that you're thinking about writing an article as well. So it's going to be a place, at least in this next one, that really pays homage to that very significant event in our history, and in mushing. So hopefully we'll do that, and then a lot of great interviews coming up as well. So looking forward to that in the next few issues coming up in the new year.
I don't know how much time you have to track someone down for a story, but I was working on a cache host for our cache of supplies in Shaktoolik, and a daughter of one of the original Serum Run mushers has just moved to Anchorage.
Wow.
And they were like, they said, we're sorry you won't be able to interview her for her stories, but she has really great stories to tell about her father. And so she's in your neck of the woods now, and
Okay.
offline I'll try and dig that up and find it for you. Maybe you could hop into Anchorage and interview the daughter of one of the Serum Run
Well,
folks. That'd be
Jonathan, that's what it's all about, is sharing the knowledge. And there's so much competition in this world, whether it be dog training or mushing. But the true relationships come with building those relationships. I just spoke at the Chamber of Commerce yesterday, and it truly is about building relationships. And I think that's what's key. And I appreciate the connection there, and I look forward to reaching out to them and hopefully having them on. Our goal is to have, I believe it's Norman Vaughn's wife. I got that
nice.
connection coming up too, and they said, "Hey, we got to get this lady on as well," because those stories, they're going to end soon, so we got to keep those going for sure.
They are, and I wish more people understood what you just said. It seems like there's this subconscious idea that people can elevate themselves by tearing other people down, and it doesn't work that way. There's so much air to be breathed, and there's so much water. There's so that being supportive of people and encouraging people, especially in the mushing community. you know um, as long as someone is striving to get to the top of the game, everyone's like, hey, I'm rooting for them. And the moment they get to the top, the big target gets put on their back and everyone starts ripping them to shreds. And um, it's a sad subconscious thing that we've got going on. But I agree with you. I think that in the mushing community, in all of these areas, in podcasting, whatever, there's just, it doesn't cost you anything to love people, be supportive of people, and encourage what they're doing, because there's plenty for all of us to do, for sure.
100%. I could not say it better myself.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. It's been an honor, and I look forward to having you back again. And we'll just I'll take that picture of my magazine with my lead dogs while I'm out on a training run and send it in to you.
Let's do it. I look forward to that. We'll definitely post it on the socials, as the kids say, and keep the spirit alive. So good luck to you, Jonathan.
Yes, sir. God bless you, and God bless your family. Take care.
Thank you.